Hello, my beloved viewers. Welcome to the International Women's Day special episode on what makes you human. My name is Mariam Bukar Hassan, known as Alhan Islam, and of course, I am your host. Today, we will be talking about the theme of the International Women's Day 2026, which is right, justice, and action for women and girls everywhere. Today, I am joined by Cynthia Rowe, and together we are about to find out who is Cynthia Rowe.
The first thing that strikes you about Cynthia is her smile. It disarms you, it welcomes you, it says without words that leadership can be warm and human even in the toughest spaces. Miss Cynthia Rowe is the head of development cooperation at the British High Commission in Nigeria. She is a seasoned development diplomat with over 2 decades of experience shaping lives and institutions across the world. This conversation asks a simple but profound question. What does leadership look like when it is grounded in empathy, service, and a belief in possibility? Ladies and gentlemen, on the International Women's Day special episode on What Makes You Human, please welcome Miss Cynthia Rowe.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me today on this special episode of International Women's Day on What Makes You Human. Before we dive into the questions, I would like to ask, and I'm sure my audience are very curious, who is Cynthia Rowe?
Gosh, okay. Well, we are the sum of our parts, aren't we? So I'm Cynthia Rowe. I'm the head of development cooperation for the British High Commission, uh, often known as FCDO for the UK. And what makes me human? Um, Gosh, maybe I start with what brings me to this point. I've been over 20 years in the service. I've worked in East Africa, in West Africa, in the Middle East, in South Asia. Um, and my background is governance. So it's all about what makes states work,
Right.
what makes them tick. It's everything from, spending public money on who it's spent on. We're going to come to that.
Right.
And anti-corruption and all the kind of exciting stuff and politics that kind of makes up our world. Um, in terms of who I am, I would say that I spent a lot of time bouncing between countries. So I'm dual heritage.
All right.
So I have both Tanzanian and UK family, and I often grew up in third countries as well. And I think what that did for me was to make me realize that really people are the same wherever you go in the world. And that's
Yeah.
really stayed with me. And I think that has also made me open and curious and up for all the new things that come my way.
That is so beautiful. When we look at what this International Women's Day theme um, invites us to do is really to reflect on the policies. But beyond that, it's also the human stories.
Mm.
And you're a senior diplomat and you've spent 2 decades of your life um, bouncing between countries and looking at how states work. But if I may ask, in your diplomatic journey, has there been an encounter with a woman or a situation that has profoundly shaped how you personally sort of commit to ending violence against women and girls? What would that be?
Do you know what? I mean, I've been reflecting on this, and what I've realized is that it's been a um a long process of many, many things over a number of years that is punctuated with shocks, if you like. So, one of the things I realized fairly early on is that every country I have ever been in has an opinion
Mm.
on what women should wear,
Right.
on what women should do with their bodies, on how women should behave. And it can be you should wear trousers, you shouldn't wear trousers, you should wear a head covering, you shouldn't wear a head covering. I mean, there's always a rule, and it's always about women. So quite early on, I realised that there is a sort of worldwide element of control,
Right.
and then that's been punctuated with shocks. And this is the violence part, and it's always the last person who stays with me. I think that takes me through to my next part of the journey. And I want to talk about somebody called, I'll call her Ida for the sake of argument. That's not her real name.
Okay.
But it was a woman I met in Bangkok, in Borno when I was up there not that long ago. And her story, and bear with me, I'm going to tell her story, was really, really touched me.
Right.
This is a woman who was living in her village. The extremist terrorists came into her village, and they captured all the boys, including her son, and they took them into the forest. The women of that village followed the terrorists, pleading with them not to injure or kill the children. This is a graphic story, and I'm sorry for it. Um, she watched the boys and her own son being killed. I will probably get quite emotional about this. And then she went back to her village along with the other women. She collected 16 children, her own children, her brother's children, her sister's children. She walked with them to a camp, and she set up a business in order to be able to provide for them in one of the camps. Then the floods came, and they swept away a lot of her business, and she still had 16 children. And then she started again. And I sat with her in her house, very, very modest house in the camp, and she told me the story, and I became very emotional, as everyone did. She was also emotional. And I just was humbled by the incredible courage that this woman and the women around her displayed in that time. And I don't know how she is still standing, but I find that remarkable.
That is such a deep human a story, and I mean, when we look at that, the learning in itself is gratitude,
Mm.
and also that recommitment to support people because you don't know their stories, and be kind to people. And I would like to further ask, this encounter, how does it influence today how you also still stand and fight to say we have to end all violence against women and girls?
Mm. Um, it humbled me. And I think the gratitude part of me is about the gratitude I have for the women and the people who stand between us and absolute degradation as humanity, if you
Right.
like. It puts fire in my belly. It makes me very determined. Um, it makes me impatient with people who apologize for it, with apologists for it, and it keeps me grounded. It keeps me. Uh, it makes me and reminds me that the work that we do really matters.
Yeah, it does. And now talking about the work that we do, and then the work that you do, of course, you are a representative of the UK in Nigeria. And my question would be, how is the UK strengthening its global leadership on preventing violence against women and girls, particularly in conflict context? I mean, you already mentioned, you already talked about a story from a conflict affected area, but as an institution, how has the UK government done that?
Okay, so what does the UK do on violence against women?
Yes,
So I think the starting point is actually how violence against women is experienced in Nigeria,
right.
and we know that at least 36% of women experience violence from an intimate partner.
Mm-hmm.
We know that violence covers sexual violence, it covers domestic abuse, it covers conflict, it covers trafficking. There's a whole range of areas that we work on.
Right.
And we know that child marriage is really prevalent. So Nigeria, I think, ranks third globally
It
in
does.
terms of child marriage. So all of those are really important areas, and we do work in three different areas that I would put out. So one is humanitarian,
Yes.
and that is where we work on medical support, on psychosocial support for women and girls in conflict. We work on economic empowerment, and we work on awareness and on referral systems. And that's mostly connected to our humanitarian work. The UK also works with other diplomatic missions on children in conflict. And we work, and in the Security Council as well. So we work to try and protect the rights and the violations that happen against children in conflict. Both girls and boys
Right.
feel it, right? They're affected by it, but
Yeah.
they're affected by it in different ways. So more boys are maimed and killed, and more girls are subjected to sexual violence, for example. So we try and work on the different sides, and for women and girls, it's the sort of often the sexual violence and the trafficking and so on.
Right.
Um, that's the children's side. The third area I would talk about is actually economic empowerment.
Mm.
So there are two different ways of going about this. One is in when you're in a very serious situation, when you are, for example, displaced and you're starting from nothing. And then, of course, there's the other side, which is where you have women who are in a better position, but also building the nation and building growth. Whatever people's situation is, with women, my view is that when you are economically independent, suddenly you have control and suddenly you have choices.
That's
And for me, that is a really big part of the story beyond immediate support.
That's right. That's right. Economic empowerment definitely for the girl child, for the woman, enables her to stand on her feet and also to care because a lot of times they're left with the children after the war. The woman, is left to carry that grief, and so that economic empowerment pillar is so important. And I just wanted to also just go a bit deeper. You mentioned the referral systems, and I'm a bit curious. How does that work?
So the idea is that there are safe spaces, usually in the camps or easily accessible from the camps, and women can go there and they can report what's happening to them. And it's a referral system, so they'll be assessed, they'll be referred to the right place for them,
Right.
and we also try and help, whether it's medical support, whether it's social psychosocial support. And then we do a couple of other things as well, which is to work with peer-to-peer networks, so women can go and talk to other women who've experienced the same thing. And then we also try and do some practical things around forensics and identifying the perpetrators and bringing those perpetrators to justice. All of this is linked in with the Nigerian system. This is nothing that we would do on our own. It's linked really closely into the communities, really closely into the authorities, because what we really want is for Nigeria and those communities to be leading this themselves. And our role is to support and to share to help make that happen.
Sounds like it's more on giving Nigeria, the government, the authorities, agency to make sure that that is solved and you do the support. That is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. Last year, during the 16 days of activism, it was heavily themed around digital violence against women, and you were quoted on media in December speaking passionately against digital violence. So, I mean, when we talk about technology in itself, it's almost become like a necessary evil, right? Because again, you have the good side and the bad side of it. And so, what role do you see technology and innovation playing in advancing gender equality while mitigating the harms that is faced by young women and girls online?
Yeah, Mariam, I think you are exactly right about the good and the bad, the good side and the bad side. And on the bad side, for me, digital violence is just another way to perpetrate violence against women.
Right.
People will always try and find a way, and digital is just the latest way that's come along, which infuriates me, of course. And so what we are doing is working really hard on the safety of platforms, making sure that they regulate themselves as well, and trying to create safe spaces for women to use digital platforms. Because if you don't do that, then women's voices are silenced,
Right.
or women fear to participate in public life. So that's the sort of the bad side of it. On the good side of it, we really support innovation. So, in my view, technology has an opportunity to be really neutral,
Mm.
so gender neutral. So, if women have access to digital platforms to digital economics, then that's where the opportunity lies, and it should be gender neutral. So we support women's literacy, digital literacy, for
Right.
example, and how they use it.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, so on a personal note,
Mm.
when we talk about digital economics and just the opportunities that are there for the women, when you also talk about them regulating the social media or the digital spaces, would you say that the responsibility lies with the people that innovate or create these spaces, or would you say that the government also has a role to play? I mean, society has a role to play because then there has to be a lot of awareness and also sensitization to whether it's the man or the woman, because sometimes even the people perpetrating
Mhm.
the hate is not only men.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have a woman also doing that to another woman, hiding behind an account, a social media account. So would you say the core responsibility lies with the government or the people who own this digital spaces to be able to sort of put it into their own framework or
Mhm.
guidelines?
I think it's a really good question, and um, I think it's all three. I mean, you asked about where does the core
Right.
sit, and I think the core, this is my personal view, the core sits with um, almost self-regulation, potentially of the platforms and of government. So, and I say that for two reasons. I don't think that anything should be driven purely by capital benefit,
Right.
by the money that is made. I think that there should be parameters set around the way that money is made, and the way you set parameters around everything over the. If you look back to the Industrial Revolution, we slowly evolved as a society and as human beings to
Right.
put parameters around the way that we generate money and generate income and wealth. So I think there should be some self parameters that
Mm.
the innovators put around themselves, just in terms of common human decency. I think it's government's job. Government's job is to protect its people, protect its society. So it should be looking out for this,
Right.
making sure that it happens in a regulated way. And I also think that we as individuals need to take responsibility for how we behave.
Right.
And when you say sensitization, um, you know, I have mixed feelings about that word because I think we all know innately how we should behave as decent human beings.
That's right.
So there can be some broad, say, cultural sensitivities around things which you can talk about, but there is a red line, I think, for every human being,
That's right.
which says, this is how you treat someone. And I think that we should all be personally held accountable for that as well.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. The IWD theme for
Mm.
2026, it highlights the urgent need to address the discriminatory laws and weak legal protections against women and girls. And it's 2026 and we're still talking about this, but can you share some examples of what you're doing as UK in Nigeria to contribute to this agenda?
I can. And you know what? I really am a practical person, and I think that everything we should be doing
Right.
should be practical
Mm.
as well. So that's the kind of stuff that I like. I would say one of the key things we're doing is on women's political representation.
Amazing.
So we've done a lot of work, and I think you've met colleagues of mine who've been working on the special seats bill.
Right.
And we think that's a credible pathway um, in our partnership with Nigeria to get women into political decision making
Hmm.
areas. So,
Right.
so really important. Um, I should say, I will repeat this at the end, that we work hand in hand with Nigerian women's rights organizations.
Mm.
So again, it's back to Nigerians leading
Having the
their
age.
change, right? And
Right.
you are an absolute example of that as well, right? Which is just fantastic. So women's political participation, that's one of them. I would say the work that we do in women, peace and security
Mm.
is really important.
Very important.
And there's another big area for us. So again, we support partners on national laws, that look at vulnerability, the vulnerability of women. We work to share our experience of international norms.
Right.
So the laws that Nigeria, the international norms that Nigeria has signed up to, and it has signed up to them.
Okay.
Um, and we also really practically try to see those laws applied, because it's only when the institutions actively apply those laws that they start to work. So a lot of our work is centered around how do we get cases tested in law to see whether those laws work
Oh,
or
work.
not.
And do you have some measures that ensure accountability when you put in those cases? Or is it still left to the authorities to determine that?
Yes, so this is about Nigerian
Right.
systems. So this is how do you get
The
accountability through the
accountability.
system?
Right.
One of the things that we can share is everything that we've learned over years, and that's not just in the UK but across the world, about how to make those systems work and how
Right.
well they work. So that's what we will share.
Right.
And by the way, it's us as the UK, but it's also, I'm a really strong believer in what people would loosely call South-South learning, right? So where peer countries and peer institutions sit together and learn from each other in similar circumstances on how to make this happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Very important. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, we have talked about work, big responsibilities, you as a senior UK diplomat, but on this podcast, we like asking the softer questions, right? What makes you human? What are the little things that you enjoy? Because everything that you have said is quite intense, and that also goes to tell how much, heavy and how much responsibility you bear in the work that you do. But what are the little joys that actually reminds you that you're human?
Did- I always get thrown by questions when people say, and so what are your hobbies? And who are you really? And it always slightly throws me, and I have to sort of sit and think about it.
Yeah.
Um, what makes me human and brings me joy? What brings me joy? Almost so many things bring me joy. And it ranges from obviously family
Oh,
and my friendship groups. And I actually do want to talk about women. I'll talk about that in a moment.
right.
Um, Animals, whether they're pets or whether they're in the wild, there is something that's very calming for me about that. Um, Gosh, honestly, I can find joy in everything, every little thing. But I'm a real water baby. So if you put me near water, in water, around water, that's kind of where I find a lot of my
That's
peace and
beautiful.
joy.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's kind of fun. Um, what gives me a profound sense of both joy and satisfaction actually are my female friendship groups.
Hmm.
And I feel so privileged to have met such powerhouses over the time that I've been on this planet,
Right.
actually. And I've been busy collecting friends as I go around the world.
I like how you say collecting because it really speaks to the intentionality about saying, okay, you're mine, you're fine, you're
It's
right.
so true, and then they've become my sanity. So these women are the women that I go to, and we sit and we talk about everything, and they've become my sort of anchor as well. And one of the things I love about women is how we can jump from the most frivolous things to like the most serious things. And one memory that stayed with me is I remember I was in Afghanistan,
Right.
and we were supposed to be having a ball. So once a year there was a ball where everybody would sort of get an opportunity to relax and sort of lay loose and just mark a moment and find a bit of joy in a very difficult situation. And as the ball was starting off, there was an attack, and so we had to go to the shelters, and we were all wearing our finery. And I remember sitting with a colleague of mine who since became a friend, and we were sitting in full ballroom dresses with our jewels and our high heels, and we were dressed up to the nines, and we had a glass of wine each, and we were talking about the latest Taliban strategy
Hmm.
that was sweeping across the country. And in that moment, I sort of looked at us both, and I just thought, women are really remarkable. I have one more story if you want to. If you don't, I have so many of these. I'll try and confine myself. Another thing that this reminds me of, and I just think about women in general, is I served in Nepal for a while, and I always used to tease the Gurkhas. And the Gurkhas have this really famous run called a Doko run,
Okay.
where they run 5 kilometers uphill and they carry 25 kgs of rocks.
Oh wow.
On their actually often they carry it on their forehead or on their backs.
Oh wow.
And it's a really big thing. It's very prestigious. It's a really, really tough thing. And they would, tell us and talk about how they were doing it. But I used to really enjoy teasing them. And I would say to them, yes, that is an incredible feat. But I bet you the women are not only carrying 25 kgs uphill, but they will have a child on the front and they'll be dragging a goat on the back and they will still beat you.
Actually, yeah, I think that women have this tenacity, right? And just a way of always finding a way to just turn, even when you say no, they turn it into navigation, so there's always a way out when it's about a woman, whether leading or like whatever space that you find us, right? And it's such a beautiful thing. Thank you so
100%.
much for sharing. I have had such a wonderful time speaking with you, and just also how your eyes light up when you start talking about your female friendships. It is so important. And I think that when women really love each other like that, it's so beautiful and the energy just comes out positively. And I know that sometimes on social media also, like, I see some posts about how, oh, women supporting women is not real and things like that. And I just say, perhaps you haven't just met the right person, and maybe you also have not worked on yourself to be the right person. And the way that you mentioned collecting your friends, like I said, it really speaks to the intentionality, because then you have the criteria, you know what you're looking for, because you also know what you're willing to offer in the friendship. So really, thank you so much for sharing. Before I let you go,
Mhm.
I would want you to share whether it's your favorite artwork that has stayed with you, or a favorite line of a poem, just one thing that is not work, that is in the art field. Maybe it's even music that you like, and why you like that.
Oh gosh, so many things immediately jump into my mind. I will actually, I'm looking at it right now. I will tell you about one thing, and it's a photograph, and it's not even expensive. I think it's something I just saw in a shop in passing, and it is for the people who can't see it. It's basically a photograph of a pair of hands, and water is pouring into those hands. And for me, that symbolizes everything that we need about life. Water is so life giving and so affirming, and it's a woman's hands, actually. And so that photograph of the water pouring into a woman's hands is actually what I carry with me to every single country. And it just reminds me about what life means and what life needs. Very life affirming.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing. Before, again, I let you go, I have a gift for you.
Oh, gosh, lovely. I love a gift. I mean, I have to say, Mary, I'm a massive admirer of yours while I'm waiting for my gift.
Thank
But you are absolutely wonderful in terms of what you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, this is the What Makes You Human scarf.
Oh gosh, how beautiful.
And these patterns represent humans from all walks of life, all the patterns, and of course, human. Now, the little story I have about the Sims here,
Mm.
if you look at it, is not perfectly done,
Mm-hmm.
and it was deliberate, because then it represents how we are not perfect as humans, but then we keep trying. And in that trying, somehow we can actually create something beautiful.
Oh.
So this is
That is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being on our podcast. We totally enjoyed. I'm sure my audience also absolutely enjoyed the time with you here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
I'm a hugger.
Oh, good. So am I. Oh, fabulous.
Thank you so much.
Really welcome. That was so nice and so pleasant. Here we go. Thank you very
Bowie face. Oh, nice, so nice. Wow.